That morning started like any other, or at least it was supposed to. I leaned over the bathroom sink, splashing cool water on my face, when I noticed something strange. The water just sat there, swirling in a lazy circle, refusing to drain. I frowned, grabbed the plunger, and gave it a few determined pushes. Nothing. The sink stayed clogged, stubborn as ever. And yet what unsettled me most wasn't the drain. It was the way unease settled in my stomach, whispering that something about this wasn't right. Daniel came in behind me, already tugging at his tie, his movements quick and distracted. He barely looked at me, let alone the sink. "I don't have time, honey. I'm running late again," he muttered, kissing my cheek like it was part of his morning checklist. Then the front door shut behind him, sharp and final, leaving me with the gurgling drain and this hollow feeling I couldn't shake. I sighed, still holding the plunger, staring at that stagnant water like it held an answer I wasn't ready to face. Normally, I'd brush it off. It's just a clogged sink, nothing more. But today, the timing felt suspicious. Why now? Why when Daniel was rushing out with that half smile, that vague excuse? I grabbed my phone, already making a note to call a plumber at lunch. Out loud, I told myself, it's nothing. But deep down, a little voice wouldn't stop whispering, something's wrong. At the office later that morning, I tried to push the thought of the sink out of my head. Reports, emails, back-to-back calls, those usually kept me distracted enough. But every so often, I'd catch myself drifting, replaying Daniel's hurried face, the way his words tumbled out too fast. Overtime again. It wasn't unusual for him to work late, but the way he said it felt different, rehearsed almost, like a line he'd spoken too many times. I shook it off, telling myself not to overthink. By lunchtime, though, that restless feeling wouldn't let go. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and called a local plumber. "Can you come by this evening?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The man on the other end said yes without hesitation, and for some reason, that simple confirmation made me feel lighter. Still, as I hung up, I caught my reflection in the dark screen of my phone, eyes tired, lips pressed tight. I didn't look like someone worrying about a clogged sink. I looked like someone bracing for a truth she didn't want to find. The rest of the day crawled by. I smiled through small talk with coworkers, nodded at their stories, but my mind was miles away. Beneath my desk, my leg bounced restlessly, as if my body already knew something my heart refused to admit. "It's just a drain," I kept repeating silently, over and over. But the words felt hollow, like a lullaby sung to a child who's already wide awake. And as the hours ticked down to evening, I realized I wasn't just waiting for the plumber, I was waiting for an answer. When I finally pulled into the driveway that evening, the house looked just as it always did, quiet, ordinary, unchanged. But as I turned the key in the lock, I felt a strange chill crawl up my arms, as though the walls themselves were hiding something from me. Inside, I dropped my bag on the chair and glanced at the bathroom door. The sink waited, water still pooled inside, mocking me with its stubborn silence. I paced the hallway for a moment before dialing the plumber to confirm. "I'll be there shortly, ma'am," he said, his voice steady, routine. To him, it was just another job. To me, it felt like a crossroads. I tried to settle on the couch with a book, but the words blurred together, refusing to stick. Every creak of the house made me twitch, every tick of the clock reminding me that answers were on their way. Sitting there in the dim light of the living room, I caught myself holding my breath, as if bracing for impact. It was just a sink, just a plumber, just a Tuesday night, yet something inside me knew better. I didn't understand it then, but that ordinary evening was about to open a door I could never close again. And once the truth surfaced, there'd be no going back. When the doorbell finally rang, I almost jumped out of my skin. The plumber stood there with his toolbox in hand, a polite smile, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. I led him to the bathroom, trying to act casual, though my palms were damp against my jeans. He crouched under the sink, muttering as he worked, the sound of metal tools clinking echoing louder than it should in the small space. I hovered nearby, arms folded, heart drumming a little too fast for something so ordinary. Minutes dragged on as he wrestled with the pipes. I kept telling myself this was ridiculous. It was just a clog, nothing more. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the drain was holding its breath right along with me. The plumber grunted, twisting and pulling, and finally, with a sharp tug, something slipped free. I leaned closer, expecting to see hair, grime, maybe a soggy clump of who knows what. But instead, his hand emerged with something small, shiny, delicate. He held it up toward the light, his brows knitting. "Well, here's your problem, ma'am. A pair of earrings. They got stuck down there." My mouth went dry. Earrings. I blinked at them, stunned, my mind scrambling for answers that didn't exist. Because in that moment, staring at the delicate loops dangling from his fingers, one truth hit me harder than anything else. I don't even have pierced ears. I must have looked ridiculous, standing there with my mouth half open, staring at those earrings like they were cursed. "That can't be right," I finally whispered, my voice thinner than I intended. The plumber just shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. "All I know is that's what blocked it. Must have slipped down the drain somehow." He said it so casually, like this kind of thing happened every day. But to me, those earrings felt heavier than any stone. I reached out hesitant and took them from his hand. They were dainty, golden, with tiny pearls that caught the light. Expensive, feminine, and utterly foreign to me. My heart clenched as I turned them over in my palm. They didn't belong to me, not now, not ever. And if they weren't mine, then whose were they? The question buzzed in my head, louder than the hum of the bathroom fan, louder than the plumber packing up his tools. "Guess you're all set now," he said, smiling politely as he slung his toolbox shut. I nodded automatically, unable to form real words. My throat felt tight, like I'd swallowed glass. I walked him to the door, thanked him out of habit, and when it clicked shut behind him, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. Alone in the silence, I stared down at those earrings again, my stomach twisting. They didn't just clog a sink, they cracked open a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. I sat at the kitchen table with the earrings resting in front of me, the little pearls catching the overhead light like they were mocking me. My mind kept circling the same truth. I had never owned earrings, not even as a girl. I never had my ears pierced. So there was no logical reason for them to be in my sink. None. The more I stared, the more my hands trembled, my breath shallow and uneven, as if my body had already pieced together what my heart refused to name. I thought back to Daniel, rushing out that morning with his tie crooked, his words rushed, his kiss empty. Overtime, always overtime. I clenched my jaw, anger and nausea rising together in my chest. Was I really that blind? Or had I just chosen to look away all this time? My throat burned, my eyes stung, but I didn't cry. Instead, I pressed the earrings into my palms so hard they left little crescents in my skin, as if pain could keep me grounded. The house felt different now, hollow, unfamiliar, tainted. Every corner of it seemed to whisper questions I didn't want answered. But one thing was certain, those earrings didn't belong to me, which meant another woman had been here, in my home, in my space. And as the weight of that truth settled over me, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Daniel had answers to give, and tonight, he'd have no choice but to face me. That night, I sat at the dining table with the earrings placed neatly in the center, like evidence waiting in a courtroom. My chest was tight, my hands folded in front of me, every tick of the clock making my pulse pound harder. When I heard the front door open and Daniel's footsteps shuffle inside, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. He walked in, loosening his tie, sighing heavily, and I knew the script he was about to perform. "Long night at work," he muttered, rubbing his neck. I leaned back, my voice calm but sharp enough to slice. "Really? Another overtime shift?" He nodded, avoiding my eyes, fumbling with the buttons on his shirt. For years, I had accepted that excuse, swallowed it whole, telling myself it was just the price of his job. But not tonight. Tonight, the truth was sitting on the table between us, gleaming under the lamp. Slowly, I slid the earrings toward him, the scrape against the wood making him freeze. His eyes flicked down, and in that moment, the color drained from his face. "Explain," I said softly, my voice trembling more with fury than fear. "I don't wear earrings, Daniel. I never have. So tell me, whose are they?" The silence that followed was deafening, heavier than any confession he could have spoken. He blinked fast, like a man caught in the wrong spotlight. "Oh, those? Maybe they're your mom's? Maybe you forgot?" His words stumbled over each other, shaky, desperate, and insulting all at once. I felt my jaw clench so hard it hurt. "Don't you dare," I snapped, my voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Don't you dare insult my intelligence with such a pathetic lie." My hands shook, not from fear, but from the rage boiling inside me. He tried again, his tone softer, like he could charm his way out of this. "Mariana, come on, you're overthinking. It's nothing." His eyes darted everywhere but mine, searching for an escape, a lifeline, anything. And in that frantic silence between us, I realized he wasn't just avoiding the question. He was confirming the truth. His silence was the answer, louder than words could ever be. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him, my voice steady now. "Who is she, Daniel?" I asked, each syllable deliberate, heavy, impossible to ignore. He swallowed hard, opened his mouth, then closed it again. No denial, no explanation. Just the weight of his betrayal hanging between us like poison in the air. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the same woman who used to look away. I stared at him, waiting, daring him to give me a reason, any reason, that would make sense of the earrings on my table. But there was nothing. His silence stretched like a chasm, and with every second that passed, I felt the last threads of my trust snapping. The man standing in front of me wasn't the husband I thought I knew. He was a stranger who had brought another woman into my home, into my space, into my life. My breath came slow, steady, but inside I was unraveling. Memories rushed in. His late nights, the faint smell of perfume that wasn't mine, the way he'd avoided my eyes more often lately. All those little warning signs I had brushed aside now crashed down on me in one cruel wave. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. I had been right all along, and he had counted on me, never finding proof. I pushed back my chair and stood, my voice cold enough to freeze the air between us. "You don't have to say her name," I told him. "I already know what you are." His shoulders slumped, his mouth opening as if to plead, but I raised a hand to silence him. I wasn't going to waste another word tonight. I turned toward the hallway, already knowing exactly what I needed to do next. That night, I didn't waste another breath on him. I walked into our bedroom, pulled out a small overnight bag, and began folding clothes with mechanical precision. Every shirt, every sweater I packed felt like a piece of my old life I was peeling away. I could hear him pacing in the living room, muttering excuses under his breath, but I didn't stop. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. The truth was sitting too heavy in my chest for tears. When I zipped the bag shut and slung it over my shoulder, I walked past him without meeting his eyes. He reached out, his voice cracking. "Mariana, wait, please, we can talk about this." But his words bounced off me like raindrops on stone. "No, Daniel," I said quietly, steady and final. "I'm done listening." His mouth fell open, but I kept moving, my hand gripping the doorknob, the weight of the earrings still burning in my pocket. I drove straight to my parents' house that night, the headlights cutting through the dark road like a lifeline. My mother opened the door, saw the look on my face, and pulled me into her arms without a single question. I let her hold me for a moment, but even then my mind was already moving ahead. I wasn't just leaving Daniel, I was preparing to end this on my terms. And by morning, I knew exactly who I needed to call. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office with my bag still in the car and those earrings clutched in my hand like a weapon. I slammed them onto his desk, the tiny pearls rattling against the wood. "These aren't mine," I told him, my voice steady, though my pulse thundered in my ears. He brought her into my home. I want him out of my life. My lawyer leaned forward, studying me with calm, measured eyes, then gave a single nod. You still have your prenup with the no infidelity clause, he reminded me. With this proof, you'll win everything. The house, the accounts, everything you built together. Hearing those words sent a sharp mix of relief and fury through me. All the times Daniel thought he was clever, thought he was getting away with it, he never realized the contract he signed would become my shield. I sat back in the chair, finally allowing myself to breathe. For the first time since pulling those earrings from the plumber's hand, I felt control settling back into my bones. Good, I said, my voice low but unshakable. He thought his lies could chain me, but I'll be the one cutting him free. My lawyer gave a small, approving smile, already drafting the papers, and in that moment I knew this wasn't just about survival. This was about reclaiming my power. That afternoon, I drove back to my parents' house and laid my bag by the bed, but I didn't rest. Rest was for women still waiting on apologies, still hoping for change. I was done with that. While Daniel went on with his affair, thinking I was too blind or too weak to see, I was already building the walls of my case brick by brick. Every phone call with my lawyer, every document signed, every step I took, it all became part of the silent storm gathering around him. At night, I'd sit by the window, the earrings lying on the table beside me, their pearls glinting in the streetlight. They weren't jewelry anymore. They were proof. They were leverage. They were the key to unlocking a freedom I hadn't realized I was starving for until that sink spit out the truth. Each time I looked at them, I felt the sting of betrayal, but I also felt stronger, harder, more certain of what had to be done. I no longer felt like the woman who doubted her instincts, who second-guessed the unease in her own home. No, that version of me had been buried the moment Daniel's silence confirmed everything. What rose in her place was colder, steadier, unwilling to bend. And as I folded the legal papers into my bag, I promised myself one thing. The next time I walked into that house, I wouldn't be leaving with less. I'd be leaving with it all. When I walked back into that house days later, I wasn't alone. My lawyer trailed beside me, briefcase in hand, his calm presence sharpening my resolve. Daniel looked up from the couch, his face twisting in shock as he saw us together. "Mariana, wait, let me explain," he stammered, rising to his feet like a man caught stealing from his own pocket. But I didn't flinch. I had no interest in his explanations anymore. I set my bag down on the table, right next to the stack of papers my lawyer was already pulling free. "Pack your things," I told him, my voice steady, almost too calm. "I won't share a house with a liar." His mouth opened, his eyes wide with desperation. "You can't just throw me out," he barked, but his voice cracked, betraying him more than his words ever could. My lawyer placed the documents flat on the table with practiced precision. "Per the prenuptial agreement, infidelity transfers all assets to Mrs. Mariana," he said smoothly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Daniel's face drained of color as his eyes skimmed the pages, the weight of his own signature staring back at him. And in that silence, I felt a power I hadn't felt in years, steady, unshakable, mine. Daniel's voice broke as he reached for me, desperation dripping from every word. "Mariana, please, you can't do this. We can fix it. I'll change, I promise." He sounded smaller than I'd ever heard him, his confidence stripped away, leaving nothing but panic. For a moment, I studied him, the man I once built a life with, and all I felt was the weight of years wasted on lies. I shook my head slowly, a cold smile tugging at my lips. "You already did this, Daniel. You handed me the proof yourself." His eyes darted to the earrings still lying on the table, those tiny pearls that had destroyed his mask. He swallowed hard, as if the sight of them burned him from the inside out. "She means nothing," he whispered, his voice trembling. But it was too late. Those words were as hollow as the excuses he'd rehearsed for months. My lawyer stayed silent, his presence grounding me as Daniel's world cracked apart. I leaned closer, my voice low but razor sharp. "Do you know what's worse than betrayal? Thinking I'd never find out? Thinking I was too blind to see? That ends today." His lips parted like he might argue again, but no words came. And in the silence that followed, I realized the man standing in front of me had already lost more than he could ever replace. I watched him crumble, his shoulders sinking as the reality of it all hit, his mistress gone the moment the money dried up, his future slipping right through his fingers. The house, the accounts, everything he once held over me now belonged to me alone. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a strangled sound, a man choking on the consequences of his own choices. I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. I stood tall, sliding the papers back into my lawyer's briefcase with deliberate calm. "This chapter is over," I said firmly, my voice carrying through every corner of the house that had once felt like a prison. Daniel collapsed onto the couch, hollow and defeated, while I turned toward the door without a backward glance. The earrings were still in my pocket, cool against my palm, no longer a symbol of betrayal, but of victory. Outside, the air felt lighter, freer, almost new. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking away in pieces. I was walking away whole. Those earrings had broken me for a moment, yes, but they had also rebuilt me into someone stronger, sharper, unshakable. And as I stepped into the sunlight, I knew this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of the life I truly deserved.